Good morning. Welcome to this class. Today we are doing a poem by Philip Larkin. The poem I have chosen is Church Going, which is one of his most liked poems. Philip Larkin is a major 20th century British poet. He was born in 1922 in Coventry in England and died in 1985. Besides being a poet, Philip Larkin has written two novels. One is Jill. Jill is the title of the novel, the first novel, which was published in 1946. And the second novel, the title is A Girl in Winter. It was published in the following year, that was in 1947. His two major collections are The Less Deceived and The Whitsun Wedding. These are the two most popular collections of Philip Larkin. Philip Larkin belongs to a group of poets whom we call the movement poets. The movement poets, Larkin and some other poets are included in the movement poets. The term movement poetry, it was coined by a critic, J.D. Scott. J.D. Scott used this term, the movement, in order to describe a few writers who included Philip Larkin, Donald Davy, D.J. Enright, Elizabeth Jennings and Robert Conquest. And most of these poets, their poems were published in a collection edited by Robert Conquest. The title of the collection is New Lines. Movement poetry is predominantly anti-romantic. It is anti-romantic, as well as it is witty, rational and sardonic in tone. The movement poets were quite active in the 1950s. They wrote mainly during the 1950s. Philip Larkin was a librarian by profession. He worked in various libraries, including in the library of the Hull University. Now, let us come to the poem. The title of the poem, as I told you, is Church Going. I will read out the first stanza. Now, this is the first stanza. The poem has 7 stanzas of 9 lines each. Once I am sure there is nothing going on, I step inside, letting the door thud shut. Another church, matting, seats and stone, and little books, sprawlings of flowers cut for Sundays, brownish now, some brass and stuff up at the holy end. The small neat organ and a tense, musty, unignorable silence, brewed God knows how long. Hatless I take off my cycle clips in awkward reverence. So this is the first stanza of the poem. The poem Church Going, it was published in the Less Deceived. This is a collection of poetry by Philip Larkin. It was published in 1955. So Church Going, the title. Look at the title, Church Going. There is a play on the double meaning of the title, Church Going. It can mean church, going to church for prayer as an act of worship. This is the first meaning that comes to our mind. The second meaning is church disappearing as an institution, the relevance of church, the significance of church is fast disappearing from people's lives. The first line of the poem, the first 2 lines, once I am sure there is nothing going on, I step inside, letting the door thud shut. So the narrator, the speaker, there is a first person speaker, he makes sure that there is nothing going on. He is not interrupting any prayer, he is not interrupting any service in the church. So first he makes sure that he is not interrupting anything, the usual service or prayer inside the church. Once I am sure there is nothing going on, I step inside. Slowly he enters into the church. I step inside, letting the door thud shut. He lets the door close with a thud. Thud is a dull sound. I step inside, letting the door thud shut. So the speaker is a kind of skeptic. he is not a very strong believer, and he first makes sure that the church is more or less empty and he is not interrupting the usual service in the church. It could also mean that he is not very sure that anything serious is happening, anything serious is going on inside the church. So these are the first two opening lines. Once I am sure there is nothing going on, I step inside, letting the door thud shut. So I hope it's clear. Now we move on to the third line. Neither church, matting, seats and stone and little books, sprawlings of flowers cut for Sunday, brownish now, some brass and stuff up at the holy end. Another church. So the speaker thinks that it is just another church, just one more church, and he is familiar with the churches. He has visited churches, maybe not as a worshipper but just as a visitor for the sake of curiosity. So this is just another church. Matting, seats and stone and little books. These are the things that the speaker finds inside the church. There are the mattings, there are seats arranged, and there is also stone. Stone means a stone receptacle, a vessel, stone receptacle for holding water used in baptismal services. So these are the things which the visitor sees inside the church. Matting, seats and stone and little books. Little books are the prayer books, books of prayer, little books, and there are also sprawlings of flowers. Flowers are scattered all over. Sprawlings of flowers which are cut for Sundays. The flowers are cut for the Sunday worship, Sunday prayers. Cut for Sunday, brownish now. Now the flowers are rather withered, so their color has changed into brown. Brownish now, and some brass vessels made of brass, some brass and other stuff. Up at the holy end. Holy end is a reference to the altar. Holy end. This is the altar, the most sacred place of the church. Up at the holy end. So this is a very mundane way of referring to the altar. Holy end. A mundane way of referring to the altar. This small, neat organ, and there is also the organ, the organ used by the choir, the musical instrument. The small, neat organ, and there is also a tense, musty, unignorable silence. Musty is stale smell. Tense, musty, unignorable silence. So the silence permeates the whole church. There is the unignorable silence which one cannot ignore. Tense, musty, unignorable silence, brewed God knows how long. The silence has been brewed for quite a long time. Only God knows how long it has been brewed. God knows how long. Hatless I take off my cycle clips in awkward reference. So the speaker of the poem came on a bicycle. He kept his bicycle outside the church and he very slowly enters the church and he makes a cursory look of the things which are inside the church. I hope it's more or less clear. I am reading it once more. Once I am sure there is nothing going on, I step inside. So the visitor first makes sure that the church is empty. There is no one around. Once I am sure there is nothing going on, I step inside. I step inside this building. I step inside, letting the door thud shut, allowing the door close with a thud, letting the door thud shut. Another church, and in the third line, it has been made clear that the building is a church. So in the first line, it is not made clear. But when we come to the third line, we understand that the building is a church. Another church. And then in the next 3 or 4 lines, the writer lists the things. What are the things which he finds inside the church? There is matting, and there are seats. There are seats for the visitors. Mattings, seats, and there is also stone. Stone, as I told you, is a receptacle. A stone receptacle which holds water for the baptismal service. And stone and there are also little prayer books, maybe the Bible, little books, sprawlings of flowers. There are also flowers are scattered, sprawlings of flowers which are cut for Sunday, flowers cut for the Sunday worship, and now these flowers are withered. That's why the color changed, brownish now, and some brass is a metal, some brass, some vessel made of brass and other things, other stuff, till the holy end, up at the holy end. Holy end is a reference to the altar. The altar, as you know, is the most sacred place inside a church, and it tends the small neat organ, and there is also the musical instrument which is used by the church choir, and some brass stuff up at the holy end, the small neat organ, and there is also a silence, very tense, musty is something that a stale smell if the door is closed for a long time, musty, stale smell, and a tense, musty, unignorable silence. The silence is quite heavy, it feels quite heavy, no one can ignore it. Musty, unignorable silence. The silence has been brewed very long, only God knows how long it has been brewed, God knows how long. Hatless, removing the hat, taking off the hat, I enter the church. I keep my bicycle outside and I enter the building which is a church. I take off my cycle clips in awkward reverence. Now this is the first stanza. Now we move on to the next one. I move forward, run my hand around the font. From where I stand, the roofs look almost new, cleaned or restored. Someone would know, I don't. Mounting the lectern, I peruse a few hectoring large-scale verses and pronounce here endeth much more loudly than I had meant. The echoes snigger briefly. Back at the door, I sign the book, donate an Irish sixpence, reflect the place was not worth stopping for. So from the first stanza, we understand that the visitor, he is not a very strong believer. He comes to the place just like a tourist comes to visit some places, not with due reverence to a church. Moving on to the next stanza, I move forward, run my hand around the font. Font is a baptismal font, a stone receptacle. I move forward, I run my hand, I touch the font, run my hand around the font. From where I stand, the roof looks almost new. So he observes the church. He observes the church and finds it is new. Maybe it is recently painted or restoration work has been recently made. From where I stand, the roof looks almost new, cleaned. Maybe it is cleaned recently, or maybe restoration work has been made or restored. There is a question mark, means he is not very certain about it. Someone would know, maybe others would know it. I certainly don't. Mounting the lectern is a desk from which the scriptures are read. So it is a desk from which the scriptures are read, something like a pulpit. Mounting the lectern, climbing the lectern, I peruse a few hectoring large scale verses. So there are Bibles inside the church, the large sized Bibles which are printed in very big types. I read, peruse is to read, I peruse a few hectoring large scale verses and pronounce here endeth. He opens the Bible, he looks on a page, and he quite by chance he reads the words here endeth the lesson. These are sometimes printed at the end of a chapter, here endeth the lesson. So he reads out these two words, here endeth, louder than he had intended. I peruse a few hectoring large scale verses and pronounce here endeth here endeth is given in quotation. Here endeth much more loudly than I had meant. So he pronounced the two words here endeth loudly, louder than he had actually meant. Here endeth much more loudly than I had meant. The echoes snigger briefly. So there is an echo for a brief moment. The echo of his words here endeth. Here endeth much more loudly than he had meant. The echoes snigger briefly. Then maybe he has completed his cursory visit of the church, and he goes to the door. Back at the door, I sign the book. He signs the visitor's book. There is a book, visitor's book. He signs his name there. The echoes snigger briefly. Back at the door, I sign the visitor's book. Donate an Irish sixpence. And you know what he does is quite interesting. He donates an Irish sixpence. He put sixpence in the collection box. Donate an Irish sixpence. And that is quite interesting because Irish pence is not legal tender in England. It has no value. Irish pence have no value in England. I sign the book. I sign the visitor's book. I donate an Irish sixpence. Then I reflect the place was not worth stopping for. Then the speaker begins to think about the future of the church. I reflect the place was not worth stopping. After all, this is a place which is not quite worthy of visit. Reflect the place was not worth stopping for. So this is the second stanza. I will just explain it once more. I move forward. I run my hand around the font. Font, as I told you, this word has come in the previous stanza. Font is a stone receptacle, a baptismal font. I touch the font. From where I stand, the roof looks almost new. Now, from the place he stands, he could see the roof. From where I stand, the roof looks almost new, as though it is recently painted. The roof looks almost new, cleaned or restored. He is not sure whether the roof is recently cleaned or whether restoration work has been made to it. Someone would know, maybe others may know it. Certainly I am not, I don't. Someone would know, I don't. Mounting the lectern, climbing the lectern. Lectern is a desk, you know, something like a pulpit where the priest gives lectures. Mounting the lectern, I peruse a few large-scale verses. I read a few large-scale verses. Here is a Bible, a very large-sized Bible, which is printed in big types. Hectoring large-scale verses, and I pronounce the words here endeth. This is the usual ending of certain chapters. The lesson comes to an end here. Here endeth. Much more loudly, louder than he had intended. Much more loudly than I had meant. The echoes snigger briefly, and for a brief moment there is the echo of his own words. Here endeth. The echoes snigger briefly. Back at the door. Then I go back to the door. Back at the door. Then I sign the book. The visitor's book is signed by the speaker. I sign the book, and I also donate sixpence, Irish sixpence. Donate an Irish sixpence. There is no point in donating a currency which is valid only in Ireland. Donate an Irish sixpence. I reflect, then I think that the place was not worth stopping for. So this is just a building. For the speaker, this seems to be just a building, and there is no more religious significance as far as the speaker is concerned. He is just like a visitor, a casual visitor who visits a place of interest. So we have completed 2 stanzas, and we will do the remaining stanzas in the coming lectures. Okay, thank you.